The Galactic Empire ship Vareth Prime was gliding through the cold black of deep space when its sensors caught something unusual. At first, the crew thought it was debris, maybe a lost cargo hauler from one of the border colonies. Readings sharpened. The object became clear. It was a ship small, old, and alone. Captain Veron stood at the bridge window, his arms folded behind his back. The vessel looked ancient, its hull covered in scars, dents, and strange dark burns. It should not have been able to survive in deep space for this long, yet here it was, drifting without a single escort. Identify it. Verify it. The scanner officer frowned. Unknown design. Weight matching partial records from Fringe. Reports. Sir, it's human. The bridge fell silent for a moment. Humanity was new to the Empire's awareness, only recently discovered on the edges of an unexplored spiral arm. They had no seat in the Galactic Senate, no alliances, no known fleets of size. The Empire considered them insignificant, yet here was one of their ships, far from its own claimed space. Bring them in. Let's see what they are doing in our territory, Varen said. A channel opened. The image that appeared on the screen was unexpected. The human captain looked calm, even a little amused. He had short dark hair, a scar on his cheek, and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of too many years. This is Captain Risa the Valiant. State your intentions, Varen said. The human did not answer the question. Instead, he gave a slow, measured smile. We've seen worse than you. The bridge crew glanced at each other in confusion. Voron's brow furrowed. Worse than the Empire? Impossible. No species matched their military strength. You are trespassing in Imperial territory, Voron replied. Surrender your ship. For inspection, or be destroyed. The human didn't flinch. Your threats remind me of a species we fought once. They were bigger than your ships, faster than your weapons. They aren't around anymore. Varen thought it was a bluff, but something in the man's voice made him hesitate. There was no fear, only memory. They agreed to meet on neutral ground, aboard a massive Imperial station orbiting a dead moon. When Reese and his crew stepped off their transport, the Empire's soldiers noticed their worn armor and strange weapons. None of it looked advanced, but everything had a purpose. The meeting began in the High Council chamber. Imperial diplomats made their usual speeches about law and order, about how humans should accept the protection of the Empire. Reese listened quietly, then spoke in a slow, steady tone. Protection, he said. That's a nice word. Do you know what it's like to protect a city when the sky is falling in fire? Or to fight in the dark because the sun has been stolen from your world? The chamber grew tense. One diplomat scoffed. You speak in stories? The Empire does not fear myths. Reese leaned forward. Myths don't leave scars on a planet's surface so deep they can be seen from orbit. The room fell silent again. Later, after the talks ended, an Imperial intelligence officer intercepted Reese in a quiet corridor. What enemy do you speak of? The officer asked. Reese looked at him for a long moment. If you're lucky, you'll never meet them. If you're not, you'll pray to. Back on the Vareth Prime, Captain Varen reviewed the scans they had taken of the human ship. The Valiant was not heavily armed by Imperial standards, yet its armor bore the marks of countless battles. There were burns from plasma weapons, deep. Cuts from kinetic projectiles, and strange melting patterns the Empire could not identify. How is it still flying? One engineer asked. Varen stared at the display. I don't know, but whatever did this was not us. As the human ship prepared to leave, Reese sent one last message. It was short and direct. Right. You think your empire is strong? Never had to become strong. That's the difference. The Valiant vanished into the void, leaving the Empire with more questions than answers. But somewhere deep in the captain's mind, a small, uneasy thought began to grow. What if the humans were telling the truth? What if something worse than the Empire really was out there? What if it was coming back? Imperial Command could not stop thinking about the human captain's words. We've seen worse than you. It was not the kind of thing a small, unknown species should say to the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Some believed it was arrogance. Others thought it was madness. But a few, wondered if it was the truth. In the shadowed corners of the Empire, those few were spies. One of them was Agent Karras. He'd been given a secret order: find out everything about humanity, no matter the risk. Officially, humans were under observation. Unofficially, Karras was already breaking into their systems. It started in a dark room aboard a disguised freighter orbiting near human territory. The ship had no insignia, no identifying codes. Inside, Karras sat at a console, his black eyes locked on streams of alien text and code. Human encryption was crude compared to Imperial standards, but their firewalls were unusual. They felt old, patched together from different eras, like a wall built from pieces of many ruins. Yet each piece was strong. It took him 3 days to break through. When he did, the first thing he saw was a file marked with a red warning: restricted, do not open. Karras opened it anyway. The screen filled with video. Not simulations, not training exercises, real footage. A human city under a blackened sky. Buildings collapsing as if pushed by invisible hands. Fires that burned with blue-white light, eating metal and stone alike. In the streets, human soldiers fought creatures that defied reason, shapes shifting in the smoke, claws like blades, eyes glowing red. Karras leaned closer. Creatures were fast, tearing through walls and vehicles with ease. But the humans, they didn't run. They fought in tight groups, covering each other, even when entire squads were cut down. They used weapons the Empire had never seen. Rifles firing bursts of light that made the creatures howl and vanish in bursts of ash. The footage shifted. A human warship drifting above a ruined world, half its hull gone, still firing every weapon it had. Soldier in heavy armor standing in a crater, holding a massive blade. Facing down something so large the camera couldn't capture it entirely, Karras' stomach tightened. This wasn't war. This was survival against extinction. He copied as much as he could before the files locked themselves, and the human system traced the breach. Alarms rang through his ship. They were coming. He escaped, barely using a stealth. Jump into uncharted space. But 2 days later, Karras received an encrypted message on his personal channel. It was from the humans. The screen lit up with the face of Captain Reese. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "We know what you took," he said. "Now you know why we're still here. Consider this your only warning." The message ended. Karras didn't report the full truth to his superiors. Instead, he gave them fragments enough to make them curious, but not enough to reveal the scale of what he'd seen. Because deep down, he wasn't sure the Empire could handle it. But word of the breach spread. In private chambers, Imperial admirals whispered about the footage. Some claimed it was fake. Others argued that no species could fake fear in there. Soldiers' eyes like that. Meanwhile, on the human side, Reese and his crew debated what to do next. The Empire had seen a glimpse of the truth. That glimpse could either keep them cautious or make them dangerous. Humans had learned long ago that fear could be a weapon, but only if wielded carefully. Far from both territories, deep in silent space, something ancient stirred. It had been moving slowly across centuries, following a trail it never forgot. The signals it sent out were faint, almost like whispers. But to anyone who had heard them before, they were a promise of death, and among all the species in the galaxy, only one recognized those signals instantly: humanity. The signals began as a faint hum in the deep space listening posts of the Galactic Empire. At first, the technicians thought it was static, from a distant pulsar. But the pattern repeated, steady, deliberate, unnatural. Reports traveled up the chain of command. By the time they reached Admiral Verone, the readings were stronger. The signal was moving. On the valiant Captain Reese, heard about it before the Empire even sent an official notice. A message came through the secure human channels, a string of numbers and short bursts of static. Every human officer who heard, it went silent. "It's them," Reese said quietly to his crew. "The old enemy." In the Imperial capital, the Senate laughed at the idea. A ghost story from a backwater species, one senator said. We've never encountered such a threat in our long history. Reese didn't waste time arguing. Humans began mobilizing immediately. Old warships, hidden in asteroid fields and buried in the crusts of dead moons, were brought back online. Crews drilled day and night. Weapons not seen in centuries were prepared. Empire noticed the sudden human activity. Admiral Varone demanded an explanation. Reese sent him a short message. You have 3 months before they reach your borders. Spend them wisely. The signal grew stronger.
Ow.
It was no longer a faint HUM. Now it was a pulsing roar across the comm channels, drowning out other transmissions in nearby sectors. Then came the first attack. A border starbase, fully armed, manned by 2,000 Imperial soldiers, went dark. No distress signal, no warning. When a patrol ship arrived hours later, the base was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. Scans showed. Only fragments drifting in space, metal twisted into shapes no weapon in the Empire could produce. The patrol crew reported an energy signature, the same one from the strange signal in an emergency meeting. Reese stood before the Imperial War Council. This is what's coming, he said, placing a small device on the table. It projected a hologram footage from centuries ago. The monsters moved like shadows given form, their weapons ripping ships apart in seconds. The council chamber filled with whispers and curses. If this is real, one admiral said, your species should have been wiped out. We almost were, Reese replied. But we learned, and we adapted. If you want to survive, you'll follow our lead. The council bristled at the suggestion. The Empire did not take orders from outsiders. But then another starbase went dark. This time there was a transmission just 3 words before the signal cut out. They are here. Imperial fleet scrambled to respond. But the enemy's movements were unpredictable. They struck without warning, vanishing before reinforcements arrived. Ships that pursued them never returned. Finally, the enemy appeared on sensors in a sector only 1 jump away from Imperial core space. Their fleet was massive, unlike anything the Empire had seen, but to the humans, it was all too familiar. On the Valiant's bridge, Reese watched the tactical display. His voice was steady, but his eyes were hard. The last time we fought them, we lost half our worlds before we found a way to win. This time, we're going to make the first move. The humans sent out a single encrypted message to the Empire: form the council, prepare the fleets, or this galaxy will burn. The War Council gathered in the Imperial capital, a massive chamber shaped like a circle so no one could claim the highest seat. But despite the grand design, the tension in the room was heavy. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats. Human Captain Reese stood alone at the center. A giant holomap floated above him, showing the galaxy's spiral arms. Red marks spread like a slow infection, moving closer to the Empire's heart. Each mark was a confirmed enemy attack. They are not raiders, Reese began. They don't want your trade routes. They don't want your colonies. They want your extinction. Some senators muttered in disbelief. One, a tall, thin alien with silver skin, leaned forward. If they are as dangerous as you claim, why should we trust you to lead? The Empire has fought wars for thousands of years. Reese's voice stayed calm, but his words cut deep. Because you fought wars for territory, we fought wars for survival. There's a difference. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Varone broke the pause. Captain Reese, if you have a plan, speak it. Reese gestured, and the holomap shifted to a new display. Formations of ships, supply routes, fallback positions. Your fleets fight in lines. That's fine for fighting rivals with similar weapons. Against them, it's suicide. We'll fight in flexible strike groups, using hit-on-fate attacks. We'll lure them into killing zones. We'll cut their supply of whatever it is they use to power those weapons. One general scoffed. We are the Empire. We do not hide. Reese locked eyes with him. Then you'll die. Murmurs erupted around the chamber. Varen raised a hand for silence. We agree. Suppose we put human commanders in charge of joint task forces. What will you need? Reese answered, without hesitation. access to your shipyards, your fastest engines, and every piece of intelligence you've gathered, no matter how small. We don't have the luxury of pride anymore, the council debated. For hours, old grudges between species flared up, but the enemy's advance forced them to listen. In the end, the vote passed barely. Humans would lead the defense. Within days, the Empire's largest shipyards roared to life. Human engineers worked alongside alien crews, modifying Imperial cruisers with strange armor plating and weapons designed for speed over brute force. The changes confused many Imperial officers. They're stripping out heavy guns. One commander complained. Because we don't have time for long slugfests, Reese explained. We hit, we vanish, we hit again. Make them bleed without ever giving them a clean shot. Training began. Human officers drilled mixed crews in aggressive, unpredictable maneuvers. At first, the Imperial soldiers resisted the strange tactics, but after simulated battles, the results were undeniable with humans leading. Victory rates tripled. News of the preparations spread quickly through the galaxy. Some saw hope, others saw fear made real. On the eve of the first battle, Reese stood with Admiral Varan on the bridge of the Valiant. Through the viewport, hundreds of ships formed up in the darkness, their engines glowing like a constellation. Remember, Reese said quietly, this isn't about winning glory. This is about making sure there's still a galaxy left to fight. Over when it's done? Varan nodded, his expression grim. It's somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the sensors, the enemy was coming. And this time, the humans were ready to meet them head-on. The first enemy fleet appeared like a shadow spilling across the stars. Their ships were jagged, irregular shapes, moving in ways that seemed wrong to the eye, as if they were swimming through the void instead of flying. On the Valiant's bridge, Captain Reese stood beside Admiral Varan, watching the tactical display. Red markers lit up the holomap, spreading fast. The enemy outnumbered them 2-1. They'll hit the Imperial front first, Varan said. We'll hold position until no, Reese interrupted. If we wait, they'll tear through you before we can react. We move now. Orders went out. The joint fleet split into several strike groups, each led by a human commander. Engines flared as the ships raced into position. The Imperial line met the enemy head-on. For the first minutes, it seemed like a normal battle, ships exchanging fire, shields flashing. But then the enemy changed tactics. Their vessels twisted and dove, slipping through firing arcs, cutting into the Imperial formation like blades. Imperial. Ships began to explode, one after another. Communications were chaos. Some commanders shouted for retreat, others for reinforcements. Strike groups go, Reese ordered. Human-led units appeared from unexpected angles, slamming into the enemy. Flanks. They didn't fight to hold ground. They fought to break rhythm. Enemy ships that pursued them were led into traps, caught in crossfire from hidden positions. On one flank, the Ranger, a small human corvette, dived straight toward the largest enemy vessel. At the last second, it veered away, releasing a spread of strange warheads. They didn't explode in light, but in a ripple of distortion, tearing holes in space that dragged the enemy ship into fragments. Imperial officers watching from the rear stared in disbelief. They fight like they've done this before, one whispered. Hours passed. The battle raged across thousands of kilometers. Slowly, the enemy momentum began to falter. Their formations broke. Human tactics had forced them into disarray, but the cost was high. The Valiant's shields were gone, its hull scorched and cracked. Entire squadrons were gone from the roster. Then came the moment no one expected. One enemy ship, damaged and drifting, suddenly turned and charged directly at an Imperial colony on the nearby moon. The Verith Prime, Varan's flagship, was too far to intercept. Without hesitation, the human frigate Horizon's Edge moved to block. Its captain didn't even ask for orders. The small ship rammed the enemy head-on, both vessels vanishing in a white-hot explosion. The colony was saved. After the battle, the surviving Imperial crews spoke of that moment in hushed voices. They couldn't understand it. The humans hadn't hesitated, hadn't even seemed afraid. when Varen asked Reese why they would throw away a ship like that. The human captain gave a quiet answer. Because sometimes survival means someone doesn't get to go home. We learned that a long time ago. The first battle was over. The enemy had been stopped for now. But everyone knew it was only the beginning. And somewhere deep in enemy territory, more fleets were already on the move. The days after the first battle were quiet, but it was not a peaceful quiet. The joint fleet floated among the wreckage, collecting survivors and counting the dead. Imperial crews moved through twisted metal, pulling bodies from shattered hulls. Some wore Imperial uniforms. Others wore human armor. On the valiant captain, Reese stood in the medbay. Rows of injured lay in silence, some unconscious, others staring blankly at the ceiling. He stopped beside an Imperial pilot who had been saved. By a human Marine during the fight? You fought beside them, Reese said. What did you see? The pilot swallowed. They don't fight like us. They don't panic when the ship shakes. They don't freeze when they see death coming. They just keep moving, even when it's hopeless. The Marine who had saved the pilot was gone. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, had been destroyed in the ramming attack. Imperial Command awarded the crew the highest honor. To the humans, it was just another day in a long history of sacrifice. At the War Council, Reese spoke little. Instead, he let the casualty lists do the talking. Even with victory, the cost was steep. One Imperial senator couldn't hold his tongue. Your people fight with no thought for survival. Is that bravery or madness? Reese's eyes hardened. You think we don't value life? Every name on that list had people waiting for them back home. They still fought. Not because they wanted to die, but because someone else needed to live. Varen studied him for a long moment. You've done this before? More times than I wish I had, Reese answered. In the following days, humans began sharing pieces of their history with the Empire. Not official briefings, just stories told by soldiers in the mess halls or engineers in the maintenance bays. One story spoke of the Siege of Atlas, where a human city fought for 2 years under constant bombardment, refusing to surrender even. After the oceans boiled away, another told of the Skiles' War, when the enemy blocked the sun for a decade. Building underground farms and launching guerrilla raids into the dark, Imperial soldiers listened in. Silence. The stories spread quickly, retold in different tongues. But always with the same message. Humans were not fearless because they had never known fear. They were fearless because they had lived with it and kept going anyway. Meanwhile, far beyond, the front lines, the enemy's movements grew bolder. Their fleets struck deeper, forcing the joint forces to stretch thin. Skirmishes flared along the border every few days. One night aboard the Valiant, Reese stood alone in the observation deck, staring at the stars. He knew the next major battle was coming. He knew the enemy would not give them the luxury of time to prepare. The cum crackled. Varen's voice came through. We've intercepted something. You should see this for yourself. Moments later, the holodisplay lit up with a transmission, grainy, distorted, but unmistakable. An enemy commander speaking in a guttural, alien tongue. The translation scrolled across the bottom. We remember the ones from the burning world. We will finish what we started. Reese didn't flinch. He just whispered to himself, let them try. The transmission spread through the fleet like a cold wind. Most of the Empire's officers couldn't understand why the enemy's words carried so much weight, but the humans knew. The monsters weren't just coming for the Empire. They were coming for humanity to finish an old war left unresolved. The War Council met in emergency session. The holomap showed new enemy fleet movements, massing in a sector not far from a major Imperial trade route. The admirals argued over how to defend it. They'll come for the route directly, one said. No, Reese interrupted. Bait. They want you to commit your whole fleet so they can surround and crush you. And you know this how? Senator demanded. Reese tapped the table, bringing up old human tactical records. Because that's exactly what they did. Last time, and they succeeded. Varen's voice was heavy. What happened? They cut us off from our supplies, starved us. Then they hunted our scattered fleets, one by one. Reese's eyes swept the room. We're not letting that happen again. The council fell into uneasy silence. Many of the Empire's leaders truly understood that the humans weren't speaking from theory. They were speaking from memory. Human intelligence teams began combing through old archives, looking for any trace of a weakness. After weeks of digging, they found something, an anomaly in enemy energy usage from the final battles of the ancient war. Reese believed it was tied to their weapon's power source. If they could disrupt it, even briefly, it could turn the tide. The plan was risky. Small fleet would have to jump deep into enemy territory to plant specialized disruptor devices on their forward supply stations. If they succeeded, the enemy's weapons would weaken just before the next major battle. Naturally, the humans volunteered. The Empire hesitated. "It's suicide," one admiral said. Reese only smiled faintly. "We've done suicide missions before." The strike fleet launched in silence. Human ships led the way, with a handful of Imperial vessels following. For days they slipped through empty space, dodging patrols and drifting through asteroid fields. When they reached the first enemy supply hub, the humans moved fast. The Ranger deployed its Marines in boarding pods, planting the disruptors inside the hub's core. The enemy responded instantly. Shadow-like ships emerged from the darkness, weapons flaring. The Valiant took the lead, weaving between blasts, buying time for the boarding teams to finish. One by one, the disruptors were armed. As the humans withdrew, the enemy hub detonated in a silent flash of light, scattering fragments across the void. It was only the beginning. 2 more hubs were destroyed in similar raids. The humans lost ships, but every target was taken down. When the strike fleet returned, the War Council watched the data in shock. The enemy's advance had slowed for the first time in months. Reese stood before them and said, "Now we make them pay for every step they take." Far beyond the border in the enemy's dark heart, the ancient commanders felt the disruption. And for the first time in centuries, they remembered the stubborn, unyielding resistance of the burning world. This time, humanity wasn't fighting alone. The enemy came in numbers the galaxy had never seen. Their ships filled the void like a tide of black steel and fire. Whole sectors of space vanished from sensors as their advance swallowed everything in its path. But this time, they faced a different galaxy. The Empire and humanity stood together, fleets united under one command. At the center of it all was Captain Reese aboard the Valiant, his voice steady as orders echoed through the coms. "All units, remember, we strike, we vanish, we strike. Again, don't give them the fight they want. Give them the fight they can't win." The humans had spent weeks training Imperial crews in their style of warfare. Now it was time to test it. Strike groups darted in and out of the enemy formations, hitting weak points, then vanishing before retaliation could lock on. The disruptors planted in the earlier raids began to work. Enemy weapons flickered, their devastating beams losing power. In the chaos, the Verith Prime, Admiral Varen's flagship, pushed straight into the center of the enemy line, supported by human frigates on both flanks. The battle became a storm of light and shadow, ships exploding in silent bursts, debris spinning into the darkness. But the enemy was relentless. Even weakened, they fought with brutal precision. Imperial ships fell, human ships fell. The enemy began to close in on the Joint Command Group. Reese knew they needed one final move, something to break the enemy's will. He ordered the Valiant and 2 other human ships to dive straight toward the enemy command vessel. Massive spire-shaped ship pulsing with dark energy. The run was brutal. Shields failed, hulls cracked. One human ship was torn apart before reaching firing range. The Valiant pressed on, weaving between blasts. At the last moment, Reese ordered all weapons to fire at once. Missiles, plasma bursts, and railgun rounds slammed into the spire ship's core. The dark energy pulsed wildly, then imploded in a blinding flash. The shockwave tore through the enemy formations, scattering them into disarray. Across the battlefield, Imperial and human ships surged forward, pressing the attack. One by one, the enemy ships broke off and fled into the void. The battle was over. In the aftermath, the War Council met in the same chamber where humans had once been doubted. Now there was no doubt. Humanity had led them to victory, Varen addressed. The room. The galaxy is safe because of them. We owe them more than we can repay. Reese stood, looking around at the gathered leaders. This isn't the end. Somewhere out there, they will rebuild. When they come back, we'll be ready together. Word of the victory spread through the stars. On distant worlds, people told the story of the battle of the strange warriors from a death world who had fought without fear. The legend grew, whispered in every port and station. They came from a world that should have killed them and saved us all.